Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to a brand new movie review. I'm Chris Garner, joined with George Aldridge to continue our reviews on the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. In anticipation for Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Men Tell No Tales, or Salazar's Revenge, we'll be giving our reviews on each of the individual movies, and today we'll be giving our review on At World's End, which was the 2007, what we thought at the time, final instalment, once again directed by Gore Verbinski. And I think this is probably more or less, out of all of the films, will be our most interesting review, because although we kind of fall on the same place with this film, I think we have different perceptions of how much we enjoy this one.
Yeah, I'll just go out and say I'm not the biggest fan of 3. I love 2, I love 1, and 3 was just a mega disappointment from what I can remember, and still my thoughts on it compared to those first 2. It's got its moments, but you know, it's just one of those.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this one, the second one got fairly mixed reviews as well, but I think everyone was like fresh off the hype of Pirates of the Caribbean coming back. This came out a year after, obviously because 2 and 3 were filmed back to back. And I will be honest though, when it came out at the cinema, and we'll talk about our first time watching the film in a minute, it did feel like an event movie. It did feel like one of those big closures to a trilogy that everyone had to see, like packed cinema on day one kind of thing. But yeah, most fans are very mixed on this one, and that's pretty much what my opinion of the film was when I first went to see it. Well, actually, the first time I went to see it, I saw it opening day. I remember seeing the trailers before, and actually really want to rewatch the trailer to At World's End, because I remember it just being just epic. Like, the music was in time with the sword fight and everything like that. Completely hyped for it, went with a bunch of mates, and my friend really enjoyed it, and I just felt gutted by it. I just thought it was boring. The plot was just meandering. It really had no focus, and I remember just coming out the film saying, well, the ending was cool, like the final fight and the ending itself, and that was about it. I didn't really get much from it. And then I had another mate that wanted to see it. I think it was the following week, and I went to see it with him just to kind of, you know, pacify him, and it was like I had a completely different experience with the movie. I was like, why did I have a problem with this film? It's just as entertaining as 2 to me, although it probably is considerably longer, or roughly around the same running time. But maybe it's because I knew what I was expecting a second time round, so I could sit back and enjoy it a lot more. But it was weird. It was almost like I'd seen a completely different movie the second time round.
Yeah, and I call it the Gatsby. Well, there's 2 ways I do this. There's the Gatsby effect, there's the Deadpool effect. Everyone on the channel knows what my opinions on Deadpool. Loved it first, hated it second. Mm-hmm. The Gatsby effect is happening a couple of times where I've hated a film the first time, I've really enjoyed it second. At World's End was a weird one, because I would just say it initially it's gone up and down in my estimations across the years. I was disappointed the first time. The second time, it was one of my first Blu-rays. I was in a mega Pirates of the Caribbean hype. This is about 2009 time. And I just remember watching it, getting it for my birthday and going really excited for it. And then when on Strange Tides come out, I rewatched them all again. And I didn't like 3 again. So it's gone up and down. And looking back now, you know, 6 years later, you know, I think I'm settled on that. I'm not the biggest fan. There's some moments that are great, but I didn't see this at the cinema. Officially, I guess, you know, I did see 4 at the cinema, and I will see 5, but I didn't see the main ones at the cinema, which is actually kind of mental the more I think about it. I'm trying to think of a franchise where I haven't seen, like, a major film recently, but I can't tell you the first time I saw this, because I was trying to think about it earlier on, and I got the Blu-ray in 2009, but I did see this in 2007. I didn't have it on DVD, and the way I didn't stream it, because back then you couldn't stream it back then on the internet, though. You didn't do films online.
Was that back in the days of dial-up?
2007? Yeah, it would have been before we got broadband. I've got a feeling, if anyone can remember us doing Harry Potter reviews, for Order of the Phoenix, I was lent it by a neighbour on DVD. And I've got a strong suspicion that maybe I was lent At World's End as well, because it came out roughly the same time as Order of the Phoenix on DVD, and cinema releases. I think Pirates was May or March, and Harry Potter was June or July of 2007. So I reckon I was always lent loads of films at once, and I must have watched them together. And then I saw it again in 2008 on a school trip on the way to Barcelona on the coach, but that wasn't the first time I saw it. And then I can remember it clearly from getting the Blu-ray.
See, that shocks me, because you loved Dead Man's Chest.
Yeah. Well, I'll go into why I've got some real issues with this later on. But as a Dead Man's Chest fan, the hype leading into this, I never, except X-Men Apocalypse, but that always looked bad. I remember the Outward End trailer looked amazing.
Yeah.
Everything was right. I was meant to watch it at the cinema, but for reasons it was cancelled. I remember I was devastated at that, and I reckon this must be one of the first disappointments I ever saw. I love my films, and normally it takes me a couple of viewings for them to come down, but to go in, I think the only films where I've come out so disappointed was Godzilla, which I appreciate a lot more now. I think I was just so hyped that I was kind of killed.
Yeah.
And I'm Deadpool. No, not Deadpool. I loved and then hated. It's a weird one. I genuinely don't know where I stand with this. Because I don't remember watching it the first time. I can always remember the first time I watched the film.
See, I have like a really vivid memory of this film, not just the film itself, but like the trailer. And I mean, I just mentioned the trailer, how much I loved it, but I remember the exact time and place I was when that trailer went live on the internet. I was at school, it was break time, and one of my friends said, "Hey Chris, have you seen the new Pirates of the Caribbean trailer at World's End?" And this was a thing that I was checking the internet for every day because I knew that a trailer was coming out. I was so hyped to see this film, and I was like, no, I haven't seen it. And he bought it up on his phone. It probably must have took about 15 minutes to load on the phone back then. And I just watched it with headphones. I just remember being absolutely spellbound by this trailer. As I said, like with the editing, with that music where you see Davy Jones and Jack Sparrow fighting on top of the masts of the Dutchman. And that's why Dead Man's Chest was so great, especially at the end of that film. And as of this recording, we watched an alternate ending to Dead Man's Chest that neither of us knew existed before that point. But it raised so many questions, and I'm guessing that's what fans were like when, again, going back to Star Wars, when Empire Strikes Back finished. You've got all these questions of where are the characters going to go. We know that Jack Sparrow's been dragged to the depths with the Pearl. He's gone to Davy Jones' locker. Cutler Beckett as the Heart. So already then you're kind of fan fiction in your own ideas of where it's going to go. And I think where people are very mixed on this film is that were all the conclusions to the characters and plot threads, were they fulfilling enough for this final installment?
I'm just going to go ahead and say no.
I think some are.
Yeah, in the second one, you kind of said, it came out, they were writing the script on set. And
yeah.
I feel that there's 2 or 3 characters that from day one they knew where their story arc would finish at the end of 3. And I feel that then there's 2 or 3 other characters where they didn't have a clue what they were doing with them, and it was done at the last minute. That's my kind of thoughts on 3 as a whole.
It just feels really bloated. Like I said, I still love this movie. I still find it really entertaining, but I have to be in the mood to watch it. You know what I mean? Like I don't just. Sometimes I sit down and because it's almost 3 hours, if it gets to a slow bit and if it's not near the battle, I'm like, ugh. Where they're parlaying or there's all these really complex interwoven double crossings and backstabbings and things like that, and the plot just kind of falls on its arse kind of halfway through this movie, and then you coast until you get to that ending.
Yeah, I mean the double crossings, all of it. It's so long, and you're right. You have to be in the mood. I think.
We were trying to figure the plot out, weren't we, before we hit record, and we were having a hard time even remembering this thing and how it flowed and who was who.
There's so much going on, and I understand that a third film, in a trilogy, to finish it, you need to up the stakes. But when you're doing back to back, look at Return of the Jedi. They answer 2 questions from episode 5. Is he your father? Is Han Solo alive? Mm-hmm. And they don't ask any new ones except is Luke going to turn? And then Dark Knight Rises as such, I know you're not the biggest fan, but they don't introduce like 1,000 new things all at once. They introduce some new characters and such, but they don't go overboard. And X-Men Apocalypse is awful, so I'll forget about that. But when I'm thinking of third part in trilogies, it's the tying of the knot, whereas this asks too many questions that you feel that this should be the middle part because there's just too much going on. And
it's a bit like Spider-Man 3, I think. And kind of like that movie, I still really enjoy Spider-Man 3, although I completely acknowledge all of the problems that people have with it.
Oh yeah, I love Spider-Man 3. But that was like the studios getting involved. We need Venom in here, but I didn't set up Venom while you're having him. And I feel that, not the studio, but they just come up with too many ideas. This is like, what would be great? a pirates council. You know what would be great? Singapore. You know what would be great if we have this guy turning heel and this guy turning heel and this guy doing this, and you know that what on earth went on in the writers' room there? Like, just too many ideas. I reckon were flying in. They just loved them more than tried to comprehend. Whereas if you look at the end of Pirates 2, there are essentially it's one question. Can we get Jack Sparrow back from the dead? You know, small branch off that tree, and Davy Jones is now Beckett's bitch. That's all you're left with at Dead Man's Chest. Whereas this just comes in like full blown, like giving you way too much info for what you need. Oh, Jack was a pirate lord, but he didn't make his successor before he died. So ta-da, we're all here to do it instead. And I'm the way I've seen this, I said to you before, like, if they've got pirate lords, this should have been said in the second film, because they filmed them back to back. The second and third film should be equal. I think if you look at the new Star Wars films, you know, they're coming out every 2 years. It's different directors, but you know that J.J. Abrams, Kathleen Kennedy, they've sat down and they've mapped out their story arc for the 3 films. And I feel the Pirates of the Caribbean, one happened. I don't feel they mapped out 2 and 3. I feel they did a couple of things for 2. Probably thought we'll do a Maelstrom ending. We'll have this happen. And 3, they just went overboard and killed it.
I think what they needed to do was, especially if it was that writing on the go as and when they turned up filming, I think they needed a good few years break in between Dead Man's Chest and this one, just to get the story fleshed out, because you could strip so many things away from this movie and have exactly the same outcome. Like, for example, we'll talk about it later when we get to Tia Dalma, but did we really need the whole Calypso thing? Like, I'm fine with having pirate lords. I agree it should have been set up sooner. Like, that's not a problem to me. But the whole freeing this god that's gonna, turn the tide for them when it gets to the final battle, and we'll talk about that when we get to the final battle, but that never really happens in a way. It's too many plot lines that are thrown up, or characters. For example, Chow Yun-fat's character, they made a huge deal of him in the trailers and the whole advertising campaign for this film. He's in the movie for about 15 minutes, and he doesn't really get anything of worth. He's a character, especially with an actor as so prominent as Chow Yun-fat, you want to see him in the majority of the movie. He could be one of the new prominent characters in the film. He could, last in it until the end, until the final fight. And if you're thinking back to Chow Yun-fat's scenes, there's some of the most forgettable scenes in the whole movie, really. I'm thinking back to it now. I know the famous line, "Welcome to Singapore," that was in the trailer. But beyond that, he just kind of bangs on about Calypso for like 15 minutes and that's it. And then he just gets blown up and he's out of the movie.
Yeah, and I love this. I love the opening scene of Singapore, and he's got the big build-up that he's got all these guys working with him. There's a massive deal of Singapore, and he works it, and then suddenly, "You're Calypso, be my pirate lord, you need to be set free," and he just starts screaming, and what on earth were they doing with him? They're married him that much, have him at least get through to the end. He just stupidly died. And what a waste, because, what's the point of having all these pirate lords if they're not going to do anything?
Well, that's it, and I guess on the subject we can talk about it now, but I do love the Pirate Lord scene, because I do think they all have unique personalities, but we don't really see much of them past that scene, and let's be honest, they are kind of stereotypes in all of their roles for the majority of it. Like, you got the Indian guy, you got the French guy who's like a foppish, loves himself appearance, very metro kind of thing. You've got the screaming Chinese lady. It is kind of very stereotypical of how they handle it, but you're right, it gears up for the ending of this film, where it's like you're going to have pirate armada against the East India Trading Company, and then how does it end? One ship from each faction goes into the middle and fights it out, which is still visually great. And this was already at the time the highest budget for any movie. It was like at 300 million, which is ridiculous for a film. I'm guessing that doesn't even count advertisement as well. But so the budget would have gone through the roof if they used all the ships. But for a final part, you kind of want something bigger. The ending's very spectacular as it is, but I'm kind of left wanting a little bit more.
Yeah, it's just, again, what's the point of the Pirate Lords of the ending? That's the ending I like, but it's the journey to the ending. It's all about the journey. The journey is non-existent. This is one of those films, and I'd put it there with Attack of the Clones, where, if say I was 6 years old and I had this on DVD, like I did with Attack of the Clones, I would always start Attack of the Clones to the Droid Factory because I hated the first hour and a half. If I was 6 years old, I would start this at the Maelstrom every single time. because you want to get to the Maelstrom, but it's not a convincing journey in the build-up. Look at Empire Strikes Back. It's the hero's journey that builds up to Luke Skywalker. Then it's all about, is Luke going to turn evil at the end of 6? You want to get to that final battle. With this, you just want to get there for the sake of getting to that last battle. You don't believe the stakes. Nothing feels real in it. And that's just down to how much they try and do the third film. They needed to keep it restricted, keep it to what the story was. Will, Elizabeth, Jack, bit of Barbosa, villains, and not all this extra lore that came out of absolutely nowhere. And we'll talk about it more tomorrow, but what's the point of having pirate lords and then like chucking Blackbeard in the next film? He wasn't even in it. And I don't know, I've got so many issues with this.
Well, we'll get through the journey now, so we'll start off with the characters and we'll sort of branch into some of the plot points relating to each character. So we'll kick off with Jack Sparrow, as always, once again played by Johnny Depp. I actually like him a lot more in this movie than I do in Dead Man's Chest. Now, they still do a lot of the jester stuff, and that mostly takes place with his sort of like angel and devil on his shoulders, like the little mini hymns he sees because he's gone mad from the locker. That aside, he feels a lot more action-packed, kind of how he was in the first movie. He still doesn't have that maturity of the character as he did in the first one, but I like him a lot more than in 2. But I want to talk about that locker stuff, because one of the biggest things that I was most looking forward to of this movie after seeing the end of Dead Man's Chest was, what's the locker going to look like? It's Davy Jones' locker. This is a prison where all lost souls go. This is controlled by Davy Jones. This is like his prison for everyone. And I was thinking maybe we're going to have more fish creatures or weird things or really elaborate CGI backdrops that might look like it's underwater or something like that. And it's a desert. It's literally just a big desert. And I don't even think it's one of those where it kind of mirrors the most hated, hellish environment of the individual person. I think this is just what the locker looks like. And then they throw all that weird stuff in with the crabs, which is... I remember like the audience just like scratching their heads over it. And if that's done just to generate that sense of confusion like Jack Sparrow, fair enough, but it just felt so random and it goes on for so long and the soundtrack isn't great in that scene. Although I do love the soundtrack to this film. I just left my head... I was just like scratching my head over it, like, what's going on? Like, set this thing up. You could have done something a lot more action-packed or creative than just, Jack Sparrow going crazy with loads of clone versions of himself for a bit of comedy.
Yeah, this is one of the things I hated most. I've said before, I'm not the biggest fan of Jack Sparrow. Being sent to the locker was intriguing. I thought that the locker would be like the opening of Dead Man's Chest. There's that
Yes.
ghoulish prison, and I remember saying the PSP game. The PSP game mentioned Davy Jones owning that kind of thing where he got the key from. And I thought the locker was going to be that, but like what you said, scaled up, have some of his crew there, something amazing, and it was a desert, and I just didn't buy into it. It didn't make sense, and I get they were trying to aim for the whole he's gone crazy angle, but it was, when you've got 30 Johnny Depps running around a screen, it's not irritating, it's just crap. It didn't work. The crabs, I don't have a clue. I hated the conscience thing. That's something you see in like terrible animated comedies. It's not something that should be in a $300 million blockbuster.
And they keep coming back into it all the way through the film, don't they, as well?
Yeah, they just don't leave it. And I'm there. I get he's got a, the locker could do something weird to you. And you look at how in the second film, well, there's normal people interact with the Kraken. They'd all turn crazy. It's meant to be like horror stories and stuff. Whereas this, like, he's basically back to normal. I know he's Jack Sparrow, but I don't buy into the locker. It was an absolute waste of time. I despise that. To get there, we must go off a waterfall. And I'm like, what? That makes no sense entirely, because you should only be getting there via Davy Jones.
I think that was a reference back to the ride, because there is a short drop in the ride. And you know how in the movie it cuts to black and you get that weird voiceover with a black screen which says dead men tell no tales. I think that's an actual audio clip off the ride around that time where there's the drop. So that's tying it back to the ride, but again, if you don't know that, it just comes across as completely weird.
Yeah, and what's even stupid is the up is down nonsense after the locker.
I do like that scene. It's completely nonsense, I'll agree, but it's elevated to me with the music in that scene.
I really like... The music's great. I really like how Jack and Barbosa are with each other. Seeing them back together is a highlight, but
yeah,
just the whole... This is how you escape Davy Jones' locker, by spinning it upside down. Like, I know my intro's got the map doing up is down. That's because I can animate it, but as a choice there's a build up to getting Jack out. It felt like a cop out and something done at the very last minute. They hadn't thought it through properly.
Yeah,
I'd have liked something that would have like at least involved Davy Jones in that entirety of his locker. He's nowhere to be seen. It's called Davy Jones' locker. You know, there should be something with him there, but it's not. It's just sand.
Yeah, and I mean, they talk about the fact that he hasn't been to the locker for ages. He hasn't been fulfilling his role as captain of the Flying Dutchman, and that he's not ferrying lost souls to that land. Which leads me on to another scene as well with Governor Weatherby Swann. There's so many scenes in this film that are just weird, like how they're put together with not much setup for them, and we get this really kind of haunting, bizarre scene of all the dead people in rowboats with lanterns, and like I think he gets one scene before this, doesn't he, at the beginning of the film, where we see him like having to fill out contracts and stuff for Cutler Beckett. He's basically Cutler Beckett's bitch, kind of like how Davy Jones is in this film. And then all of a sudden we learn that, I mean, he was he wasn't like a prominent character, but he was a prominent side character, I would say. And they've killed him off screen. Now, I will say fair play to this movie, and it being at the time the final one before they did 4, to have the balls to kill off a lot of their cast, but it just felt like it had no weight. It was just like, oh, okay, then we killed him off. That didn't really have any point. He clearly didn't have a role in the movie now. They didn't know what to do with his character, so it was just, let's get rid of him, let's just kill him off. It was really weird.
Yeah, I was actually quite angry at this because, you know, he's not a major character, but if you look at how they treat him in the first film, and he has some interesting things in the second, I get that his purpose is done, but an off-screen death, a stupid death, and just for the sake of it, like, what? Do something, integrate him into the plot. You know, we'll get to it later with Norrington's death, that him turning good again. He could have. There's a place for him in this film still.
He could have been trying to like sabotage Cutler Beckett through like, I don't know, paperwork or something. It doesn't sound very interesting, but I agree that he could have done something in Port Royal. Yeah,
there's a purpose to the character, and they completely get rid of that. And then, you know, Elizabeth's done grieving over him within like 2 minutes. Didn't like that as either, and I'm not the biggest fan of Elizabeth, everyone knows that, but it was a waste of a character. And yeah, it's a shame because I really enjoyed him in the first 2 films, and just seeing a death like get chucked in there, it's just tactless, and they clearly didn't, you know, like I said earlier, they got to this 3rd film and they clearly knew the ending to a couple of characters, not many. This is a clear situation where they probably wanted to kill him, they didn't know how, so they just decided to have it happen on the spot.
Yeah, and I mean, if Davy Jones isn't ferrying the souls to the next world, what are they going to do? Do they just keep sailing? Like, could you just keep sailing past them on a constant basis? Do they go anywhere? Like, these things are never answered, and it gets to a point in the film where you've moved on to other things, the plot's moved on, that you don't even think about it, and you just chalk it up to they didn't know what they were doing. But it is kind of irritating if you did like the character before this point. But you mentioned Elizabeth Swann. I think we should get onto her because there is a lot to talk about her in this movie. Before we get to the main part that we both hate, I just want to say that, again, like the previous 2 movies for me, I hate the relationship storyline in this with her and Will Turner. The acting's abysmal, they have no chemistry at all, and the film keeps thinking we give a shit about these 2 characters being together, and we really don't. We're not in it for that, we're in it for the pirate action. You might be in it for, you know, Barbosa or Johnny Depp's funny antics, whatever it is. But it certainly isn't this relationship angle, and it just gets to a really cringe. I thought it was bad in 2. It's ramped up so much worse in this movie, down to the fact that they get married during the middle of a battle.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't buy into Elizabeth at all. Again, I do like Will. I like the relationship angle with his dad, but Elizabeth is just a wet blanket. A Mary. This is the definition of. I've said it. This is the second time. I hate the Mary Sue catchphrase. Ray's only had 1 film. I'm sure stuff will happen with Star Wars, but you know, at 3 films in, you are a pirate, goddess, lord, king of the seas, married to the husband that runs the sea, and all this nonsense. She had a story in the first film. There's nothing left for her, and it's a terrible relationship angle. And in this one, like, again, I want to see with the Will stuff with his father. He makes it clear that he's here to set his father free. That's his goal. That's a character arc. What's Elizabeth got? Nothing. So what do they get to the last film? Oh, guys, we don't have anything to do with Elizabeth except have her marry Will. I know. Let's make her Queen of the Pirates.
Yeah.
Why? Well, I need someone to explain why. There's nothing to her, and it's such a shame because she's one of the worst characters of the entire series, and at the time, the final film, she is at the forefront of it all. I'm mind boggled, and we'll talk about 4 tomorrow. But when I rewatched that, I know they don't have Will and Elizabeth. But a part of me was like, you know what? It's given 1 or 2 other actors or characters a chance to step up. It's enabled a story to happen without the need to force feed Elizabeth into it. That's one good thing I say about 4. I'll go into that tomorrow. But she is just awful.
See, with 4, and again, like we'll talk about this more tomorrow, but I still think they absolutely find a way to shoehorn in some way a character like Will and Elizabeth into the next movie, and it looks like they've done that for 5 as well. Yeah, the Pirate Lord thing. This would have been. I'm fine with having like a powerful female character. I absolutely am, and I'm going to compare her to another character from another trilogy, although she only appears in the 2nd and 3rd movie. Eowyn for Lord of the Rings, played by Miranda Otto. So in the 2nd movie, we're introduced to her character, and she's that female character that wants to step up. She wants to make a difference. She wants to be more proactive, but her role as a female is kind of keeping her down. And then she comes into her own in the next movie where she rides into battle and is the one who kills the Witch King. That's fine because that's been building between 2 movies, but where she's more or less been exactly the same character in the 1st and 2nd movie. I know she was kind of like a lady of the house at the first part of the 1st movie, but by the end of that 1st film, she does become more piratey, and she does embrace that side of her, which she has all the way through the 2nd film. But then they just spring everything on you in this movie. As you said, like, she's a goddess, she's Calypso, at least they think, although she isn't, and then she's a pirate lord, and then she's giving motivational, epic battle speeches before the battle takes place, and it's too much, because it doesn't feel earned for the character. So, in moments like this, and this is actually my most cringeworthy scene of the entire film series, is that speech she does before they go into the final battle. She plays it terribly. Her acting in that is just completely terrible, and it's a scene that I would have loved Barbosa, for example, to give a battle speech to, because he's that kind of character, and when he is just, when he is behind the wheel of the ships and he's issuing commands and shouting nonsensical things, it's great, and I would have loved that scene to have seen Barbosa step up to that. But you just got Keira Knightley really trying, and I don't know if I blame her, because I think she's a fine actress now. I think she's definitely blossomed into a great actress now. Not so much around this time. Or if it's just down to the fact that I don't care about the character because it doesn't feel earned that she's earned this place as Pirate King. She's just kind of been thrown into it and feels really out of the depth.
I just talking about Keira Knightley quickly. Yeah, what you said, at this point of her career, she done Bend It Like Beckham and these 3 films, essentially. And I feel that since these 3 films are finished, she's gone about her business in a good way. She's been nominated for Oscars. She's done smaller projects. She hasn't been about in blockbusters, and she has done very well for herself. But with this, like, I can't tell if she's just bored to be there as well. It just feels so plastic.
I did get that impression from this one. It felt like, I'm contractually obligated to come back for this 3rd one. Let's get it out of the way. Maybe it was the fatigue of filming 2 films back to back, if she wasn't used to that kind of filming schedule. Yeah,
because I was going to say, Orlando Bloom, he's done 3 in a row, so he knows all about it. But what he said earlier, she's given this speech, it would have been better Barbosa. Barbosa marries them, and his speech, him just doing the vowels, is probably more dramatic than anything Keira Knightley does in the trilogy.
Yeah.
It's just another pointless plot angle. They could have got married any time. I liked the whole they got split up on their wedding day at the start of 2. Don't know why they need to get married at sea in 3. Because we all knew what was coming anyway. It's a pointless marriage. But no, she's just Elizabeth. Sorry, Queen Elizabeth. I really hope she's not in the fifth one for long. That's what I'm going to say.
I don't think she will be. Judging by I think we're just going to get one really brief glimpse of her, in all honesty. I think they just brought it back, because apparently this fifth one's going to be the last one, whether it will be on... Because they said that for 3, and look where we are now, so take that for what it's worth. But I think they've just brought it back to kind of cap everything off. We need to talk about Will Turner, because, again, he gets a lot to do in this movie. Kind of. Well, at least he does at the end of this film. So we get a little bit more with his relationship with his dad, although I think they kind of screwed the pooch on this one, because Bootstrap Bill was a really interesting character and probably one of the best ones of Dead Man's Chest, actually. And in this one, I get that they're doing the whole thing of how he's becoming more and more possessed by the ship with all the increased years of service and Davy Jones's control on him. But he's more or less just sort of like a faceless zombie in this movie and doesn't have much to do. So that interesting character dynamic from the previous movies essentially gone or put on hold for a while. Really, all he gets to do in this movie is at the very end where he gets killed, which genuinely did surprise me when I first saw this. I didn't know they were going to kill off one of their main of the 3 characters. And then they bring him back and he becomes captain of the Flying Dutchman. And it's a cool moment. I do like that moment of the film. I guess I just love seeing the Flying Dutchman burst out of the water. But it's like, this is where we were going with this character the whole time, from Will Turner in the first movie. We were getting him to this point to die on a ship and become captain of the Flying Dutchman. And if you did want like a happy ending with Will and Elizabeth, if you kind of cared about that, it really isn't. It's a very bittersweet ending, because he can only come on land for once every 10 years, just like Davy Jones can. And there is a post-credit scene of this film where we do see it jumps forward 10 years and we see Keira Knightley, who hasn't aged a day, with their son, who's now 10 years old, waiting for him to come back. And some people have thought maybe after he's devoted 10 years of his life to this, he can come back to land for good, or maybe this was just that one day where he gets to see her. I don't know. Again, it feels a bit strange, like I wouldn't have expected this is where they were going with the character, but if we're comparing it to the likes of Elizabeth, for example, I don't really mind that, where his character goes at the end of this film.
I really like what they do with Will. The dad stuff's a bit odd. I guess that's more down to the fact that Bootstrap Bill is now, a part of the crew for eternity, and he's just gone a bit mental since he's been in full-time work. And the ending, no one saw coming. I get, when they get married, it's all lovey doodah. They're going to save the day together. They're going to go off and live their lives. And I remember it was pretty brutal when he dies. I mean, it's not what you expect in, like I said, a sort of season finale as such at the time. It's, oh my god, he's dead, and only when you realise that Davy Jones dies, oh my god, he's going to be captain of the Flying Dutchman. I love it.
And the music in that scene as well is fantastic as well, where they're all chanting part of the crew, part of the ship. Yeah,
it's a great scene. I mean, they don't show Cut in the Hat, obviously, but you get the scars, you get his new sort of costume design with the bandana over the top. I really sort of dug what they did with it, because again, I'm not a fan of Will and Elizabeth, so it's nice they get split for 10 years now. But I really enjoyed. I don't like all the mediocre stuff beforehand of where he keeps trading people in and out to get to his dad. It's a bit over the top, a bit stupid. But I love when he gets to that final point, the end of the trilogy. What have they done with this character? He's evolved from that weird kid that's obsessed with making swords to captain of the Flying Dutchman, essentially the peak of piracy. Sorry, but I like it. It's one of the few things that I really did enjoy in this, and like exactly what you said, when the Dutchman comes out of the water, it's always a really awesome feeling, and I really hope for that in the fifth one, in the scenes that he is going to be in it.
Yeah, me too, and I don't know how much he's going to play into it, because it seems like they're already balancing quite a lot with Barbosa and Jack, and they've got to introduce the new villain, so I don't know how much Orlando Bloom's going to be in that one, but it will be nice to see him back, especially because it looks like he's still captain of the Flying Dutchman. We'll talk about that scene where it teams up with the Black Pearl to take out Beckett once we get to his character. Let's talk Barbosa, because this was the big, awesome cliffhanger at the end of Dead Man's Chest, which I think caught everyone by surprise. No one saw this come in. And this is the movie where we essentially get Barbosa in the movie full time, just like how he was in the first film. And Geoffrey Rush is great. He is easily, for me, the standout in this film, and he kind of has been for every single film that he's in, especially 4 as well, when we get to talk about that. He's just having the time of his life playing this character, and some of the best bits in this film are where he's having, it's almost like a dick measuring contest between him and Jack, like who's more qualified to be captain of the Black Pearl again. It's different because we saw him as more of a villain, like a tragic villain almost in the first film, and then he's essentially a protagonist. He's with the main crew, and you completely buy that transition because we just like the character of Barbosa so well, and that's all completely down to Geoffrey Rush's performance and how he brings life to that character.
Yeah, he is amazing in this. Like I said, the cliffhanger ended 2, no one knew it was coming. And in 3, the stakes were perfectly there that he had to work with Jack. They didn't want to, but they do. And those two, Jack's best moments in 3 are when he's with Barbosa, that's how I feel. And vice versa. And, you know, it does set up 4 nicely that those two will be on their way together for a little story. Maybe we'll get that in the 5th one, I don't really know. But just seeing Geoffrey Rush back is absolutely amazing. He's a phenomenal actor, and the fact that someone of his stature like really enjoys doing pirate films is awesome. But you know, he just transforms into the character so well, and when he's commanding his crew, you know, he's a pretty fierce captain. His costume is still amazing. He's the exact same. He's got his pet monkey, he's got the apple, and he's just a savage when he fights. It's what I said to you before we hit record. The one thing I would have liked was for him to interact with Davy Jones more, because I thought there would have been some amazing potential between those guys. But except the standoff, I don't genuinely think they actually do anything. I don't know if they ever speak to each other in the film at all.
No, I don't think they do. No.
And that's a waste of 2 amazing villains that you could have had some really good chemistry with, I feel.
Yeah, I think it's just the lack of priorities in this film and the lack of focus between some of the character interplay. I think for the most part it's really good and sort of who they pair each other off with, but you could have easily cut out some scenes of this film and devoted it to Geoffrey Rush and Bill Nighy. Because, I mean, that's a combination of actors I want to see, just thinking about that, especially how both of them really overact and just ham it up to the max because they love doing what they do. That would have been really cool. I think we need to talk about Davy Jones then now, or I think more importantly we should do Cutler Beckett and Davy Jones, because I would say that Davy Jones takes a back seat in this movie to Cutler Beckett as the villain.
Yep. Is it a problem? It's a problem in this, but it's one that half works. So, like we said, Cutler Beckett, I said the second one, Cutler Beckett's kind of like the Emperor. He is the threat, but he's taken, you know, he's hiding behind Davy Jones, essentially in the structure of the second film. And this is where, you know, the third one, the Emperor, comes into it. Beckett's at full power, Davy Jones is his bitch. I love the angle that he is controlling him. He's got 2 cannons pointed at the heart at all times, just in case he wants to try and do something. However, Cutler Beckett is phenomenal in this. He's doing his role as a villain absolutely phenomenally. He is, you know, a snidey piece of shit. He's
hanging children in this movie.
Yeah, he's pure evil. It's like, what way to be a bad guy than just kill some kids? Go do it. He does it in the opening scene, mid-sentence of singing. And the issue I have is that I've got no issue with Davy Jones taking a back seat. However, by back seat, it's like at the back of a coach train. He's non-existent. It's pointless. When Darth Vader takes a back, it's the best comparison doing Empire and Dead Man's and this and Return of the Jedi, because in terms of trilogies they're brilliant and they're similar in terms of blockbuster style, that sort of thing. Darth Vader, yes, he takes a kind of backseat to Emperor, but he's still present and the story is integral to him. Yeah. Davy Jones is literally gone. That he just kind of, I feel he's in this film because he has to, and it's such a waste because he's so amazing in the second film. Even in this film, Bill Nighy is outstanding. It's like they've almost forgotten about, again, they got to terms like, oh shit, well we took his art away, what do we do with him now? You know? And yeah, that's just my initial thoughts before I get into the worst bit of it all.
Pun intended, his character does just kind of tread water throughout the entire movie. Although I will say the best bit of the film, with Davy Jones involved at least, is when he does take back that control when he kills Mercer. I think it's during the battle, isn't it? Or it's just before...
It's during the battle, it's...
Because he takes control of the wheel, doesn't he? And then he kind of turns it, and I think he tries to collide with the Pearl.
Yeah, I remember watching this. It's one of those few... It's up there. I'm guessing it's Rake's tentacles in Old Boy when he eats the live octopus. King Kong, he eats that squid creature. And in this, when he gets his tentacles going through someone's nose, mouth, ears...
Eyes, I think, as well, don't they? They come out the corner of his eyes as well.
It is disgusting. And Davy Jones is loving it. It's the kind of death that Mercer deserved, because he is pure evil, and it was really cool to get that death. But why wasn't Davy Jones doing this earlier? He just loses so much credibility in this film, and it's almost like that final battle that he kind of takes himself a bit seriously again, and it's just too late. The damage has been done in the previous 2 hours of nonsense. Yeah.
See, I like both, like you, I guess. I like both Cutler Beckett and Davy Jones equally, and if the focus had been more on Davy Jones in this film, I think that would have took away from Cutler Beckett, and vice versa, and as this film goes, we get more Cutler Beckett than we do Davy Jones. I don't have a problem, even to the point where Cutler Beckett's the final bad guy to get taken out of the movie. He's kind of like the end goal that they need to wipe out, because he's head of the East India Trading Company, so it makes sense to kill him off, but I do think they needed to... if there was any kind of menacing quality to Davy Jones in the second one, it's essentially gone in this one. Apart from that scene we just mentioned, he's more played for laughs in this one, I think, to the point where there's even a great scene where he just pimp slaps a cup of tea out of Orlando Bloom's hand midway through the movie. It's stuff like that does take the edge off his character. I'll completely agree with that. And if we talk about neglecting another villain character in some way, shape or form, to the point where they've just completely killed them off screen, they get a brief mention, brief clip, the Kraken.
Yeah, I was saving for this. This was the moment. As I've said in 2, the Kraken is one of my favourite scenes of the series. It's the best scene in the series. I remember being so hyped. I was like, oh, Davy Jones is going to get Beckett with the Kraken to get the heart back. I don't know. I was so excited to see what's going to happen to the Kraken. And he's dead on an island. This was without doubt the worst thing about this film. And I completely understand that they can't do Kraken set pieces again. They're expensive. This film's not about the Kraken. However, to kill such a menacing threat off screen between films, it's got a reason. It makes sense for Beckett to say, you needed to kill you put your pet down or something like that. But people want to know how the Kraken died. I was a very interesting Google today. People explaining, trying to figure out, did he just tell it to go on a beach and die? It's absolute nonsense, because by building this amazing villain, you've completely lost yourself, because they didn't write a way to get rid of him. And it's an absolute disgrace. You kind of mentioned to me the other day that it would have been awesome if the Kraken could have turned up at the final scene with the Maelstrom stuff. That would have been amazing if Davy Jones got his swagger back. Mm-hmm. There's stuff they could have done with the Kraken. They chose not to, and I understand that. But by doing that, they've got rid of a character, a villain, a set piece that they needed in this film, because it was set up so wonderfully in the second. Imagine having a lightsaber duel in like the climax of The Empire Strikes Back, and then because Luke's lost his hand in Return of the Jedi, he's not going to have a lightsaber duel. It'd be like doing that.
Yeah.
But people want to watch it for that, and they really, again, writing, they missed a trick. They really missed the chance to do something amazing, and they didn't think it through, and they've paid the price for it.
See, I can see both sides to it, because on the one hand, we had the Kraken. He was the prominent antagonist, really, I guess, or sort of like big thing they had to fight against, the obstacle they needed to go against in the second movie. And we had 2 Kraken battles in that movie. Could they have done a third in some way? Could they recapture the magic as what they had in the previous movie, or would it just feel like they're repeating themselves for the third one? Because with the Kraken, there's only really a couple of ways you can go about a Kraken attack on a ship. It's ultimately going to end exactly the same way. So on the one hand, I can see the reasoning for getting rid of the Kraken completely. On the other hand, they should have written it out a better way than what they did in the movie. Saying that, Davy Jones was forced to kill it, like, fair enough, okay. Either let's see that play out in a really quick flashback sequence, because that could be interesting and it explains everything, or just give us a better way. And even when we see the dead body of the Kraken as well, they kind of try to play it up as this really big, like, emotional, philosophical moment of it's a theme showing how the pirates are getting wiped out. What was good and sort of like mythic and had some weight to it is now being extinguished slowly. So we're seeing the Kraken die and the pirates are dying out. They try and play it off as something bigger than it actually is, but it never amounts to anything, because as an audience member, we're just sitting there pissed off that the Kraken's dead, and we're not going to get it throughout the rest of this movie.
Yeah, and it's just a stupid way of handling it. What's worse, they did that speech about being the last of the pirates is, clearly that was the last Kraken. Good excuse to write about the rest of the series, but if they'd have showed, like I said, they don't do anything with Davy Jones. If they'd have shown him kill the Kraken or give the order, that would have added so much emotional weight to the film, to the villain, the tragic villain stuff. What I love with Barbosa in the first film is that speech, he's being a bad guy and all that, and he goes like, I can't feel warmth, I can't feel like drink, and although he's this bad villain, it's kind of tragic the way he talks about it, and then he puts his hand out in the skeleton, whereas this is David Jones, oh yeah, you killed your pet mate, off screen, between films. I don't completely get why they don't want the Kraken in it, but again, they did not think it through. Getting rid of him, it was cheap. It's not expensive to even have them do something. He could have just deleted, not deleted, but he could just never pull the trigger on it. You could have had Beckett give him some reasoning, say, I'm going to have the heart done if there's any sign of the Kraken. There's absolutely nothing, and it's just too cheap to say kill your pet. I feel that they completely wasted that, and it's sad because the Kraken's amazing.
I know it's pointless doing this as well, just kind of coming up with ideas of how they could have done it. Even if they didn't have it involved in the Maelstrom, if you wanted to get the Pirate Lords involved, have Davy Jones set it on the Pirate Lords in their ships. Imagine like however many ships there are, 50 ships or something attacking the Kraken at once. I get you would have been cutting away from the main focus of the characters on board the Pearl and the Dutchman, but it would have given the other characters something to do. If, like what we were talking about, we wanted to see them do more stuff. That's just an idea anyway. Again, I feel like I'm being really negative on this film, and I will say at the end how much I do really enjoy this film, but there are a lot of problems with this film, and we do need to address them. One of my biggest ones in this film as well is the treatment of Jack Davenport's character of Commodore Norrington, or Admiral Norrington as he is in this film. I didn't really know what to think of him in the first movie. He kind of serves the purpose for that movie, but he is meant to be that unlikable character because you are rooting for the pirates. But in the second one, he really does probably get the most character development out of anyone in the entire series of Pirates. He is reduced to the level of the people he was trying to capture and imprison. And it's kind of nice bringing him down to that level. At the end of that movie, we get to see that he takes the heart back because he wants his position back, he wants a promotion, he wants to get his old life back, which is a really believable course for the character. And then you get to this movie, and you do nothing with it. I think he shows up for one scene towards the beginning, and then he helps Elizabeth escape, and there's a bit of redemption in him. And then he's immediately killed by Bootstrap Bill, just by being stabbed. It's the most anticlimactic thing ever. I kept thinking when I was watching the film, no, he's going to come back at the end, he's going to be fighting alongside the pirates, and it just strikes me as, again, they had too many characters that they'd introduced into the second one. There was all these leftover characters. He didn't fit into their plot that they'd had written, so we've got to address it somehow. Let's just kill him off in a prison escape.
It's a waste. He's got the best character progression in the second film, especially if you look at the beginning of 1 to end of 2. He's got his promotions back, and it's just if you love me, it's, again, Elizabeth, if you love me, you will let me go. Essentially, that's how it is, let's be honest. And stupid death, waste of a death. He deserved better. He deserves to be in the final battle to some degree, considering they make out that he has an armada essentially at hand. He's an admiral. We don't see him given any orders because he's been killed halfway through. He needed to get to that final part. Again, they clearly got to this film. It's we did this really good thing in 2, and 3 we're not quite sure how we're going to do it. So, let's just kill him off. Yeah, it's just it's such a shame, because if you look at what happens with him in 1 and 2, get to 3, and it's such a letdown. He feels like he's in 1 just a one-note soggy biscuit, and anything about him is just completely gone, which is such a shame.
Yeah, I mean, I love Jack Davenport in these movies as well, and I still really wish he'd have got more to do in this movie. A character that gets way too much to do in this movie is the character of Tia Dalma. Now, I think we disagreed on this with our Dead Man's Chest. I really liked the character of Tia Dalma. I said that she was something new in the Pirate series. It felt a bit fresh. Her accent is a bit crazy, it is a bit over the top, but I still liked her character, and when you watch Dead Man's Chest again, you do get that scene that sets up the relationship between her and Davy Jones, in that they both have the same identical locket. That's fine. I'm cool with Tia Dalma being sort of like an old flame of Davy Jones. He's become cursed because he didn't fulfill the task, the role of Captain the Flying Dutchman with ferrying souls to the other world. But did we really need Dalma to be this like heathen goddess of the sea who can transform into crabs and grow to like 100 foot tall? This is the part of the film that I really hate, and honestly, like when I'm watching this movie, if I'm skipping any scene, I'm skipping straight to the Maelstrom scene, just getting right past that Dalma nonsense, because everyone laughed at it at the cinema. Everyone was like, what the fuck is going on? It wasn't needed. You could have still had that like relationship aspect. Maybe Davy Jones could have killed her character to try and free himself of the tether of that love he felt for her, which could have really, psyched him up for the final battle and just fueled him with that anger. But again, it's a character they didn't really know what to do with. Let's just tack this whole god aspect to her. Then she disappears, and they keep saying that Calypso's going to turn the tide of this fight. Like she is the ultimate weapon. If we can get her on our side, we've essentially won this battle. And what does that storyline amount to? She kind of makes a little bit of bad weather for a cool backdrop for a final fight, and that's really it. There's nothing else to it.
Yeah, it's when I say it gets stupid, she turns literally into crabs. I like the scene with her and Davy Jones when you see him in that human form. He's a bit, upset and stuff, but she gets way too much to do, and they do too much with her. Completely stupid reveal, stupid end. I love the Maelstrom, but why did they choose to have her do that?
Because I guess her ultimate motive, right, was to just be set free. Like, she wanted to get all these pirate lords together in one place to vote for her to be free, and that was just her agenda. But if we think about that, and then we look at a character in 2, she was kind of just holed up in a random voodoo shack in the middle of the woods, and she didn't seem like she was really trying to do anything to get these pirate lords together at that time, which you think she'd be able to. She was just kind of there as guidance and sort of spiritual, bizarre advice to Jack Sparrow on his quest, and that was fine. Just keep a character to that. It really just doesn't make sense when you try and think about this entire thing.
Oh, it doesn't make sense at all. It's just ridiculous. I know they built up as a mystical person too, but they just take it too far for that third one. It'd have been better if Davy Jones outright killed her, or the other way around.
Yeah. And I guess the last character we need to talk about, we'll talk about some of the other moments in specifics after this, but the fan service character in this movie was introducing Keith Richards as Jack Sparrow's dad, Captain Teague. I enjoyed it, but it was the biggest wink wink nudge nudge moment to the audience I've probably ever seen in cinema history. It's because, Johnny Depp went on record and said that Keith Richards and his persona was one of the major influences in how he approached the character of Jack Sparrow from the original movie. So it's just pandering. It's just fan service to get him in the movie to kind of reference that. And I don't mind him. He's not in the movie for too long. You can completely see he is just out of it on set. Like, whether he's on drugs, whether he's drunk, or whether he's both, you can definitely see that side of the character. It's fine. It's a fun little moment. Not really necessary, but I'm not hung up on it, really. It's fine.
Yeah, I've got no problems with it. Everyone knows Keith's inspired by Keith Richards, blah blah blah. It's a cool little nod. It's not irritating. He doesn't have a big purpose in the film. It's just literally a wink wink nudge nudge. I'm happy he doesn't do too much. There's no need for him to be in the 4th film.
Yeah. And
fortunately for the 5th film, we have Paul McCartney, which is actually the most tragic thing I've ever seen in my life. But I understood why, and I liked it in this film. That's something I did like, because it wasn't important. That's what a cameo should be.
Yeah, and we find out also that Jack Sparrow's mum's apparently is a shrunken head and has died many years before this. I didn't know if that was tying back to Pelagosto or like Dalma with like the whole voodoo thing. I don't know. Actually, it kind of reminded me of Prisoner of Azkaban. We like
the shrunken heads. Yeah, that's what I've always thought when I've seen it.
So that kind of covers us for all the characters now. I guess we've talked about most of the scenes, in all honesty, throughout our discussion of the characters, but are there any other particular scenes that you wanted to talk about? Any favourite scenes? Any scenes that you wanted to get a discussion going on?
My outright favourite scene is just the Maelstrom. I know we've kind of covered it, with Will dying and this, that and the other. I guess the end of it, it's just good business. That has become an amazing video meme online. It's, he's a bad villain. As in you hate him. And he gets the death he deserves. The worst villains need to go out in the best possible way. And my gosh, it is a stunning scene.
Oh yeah, I mean, he can talk the talk, but he cannot walk the walk. And it's that scene where all of his officers are like just screaming at him for orders. What do? You've got the Flying Dutchman and the Pearl bearing down on him, two of the most powerful ships on the entire, just on all the seven seas, and he's completely out of his depth. He has no clue. His one option, his one hope was that Davy Jones was going to beat him back. He could still maintain control, and you just see the look on his face. The actor is fantastic. Everything is just crumbling down around him, literally, to the point where it's kind of a hokey shot and completely unbelievable, but visually I just love that scene where it's slow motion and he's walking down to the middle of the ship and the banisters explode and all this shrapnel's going around him, and then this ball of fire just hits him and you just see his body land into the flag. It's kind of on the nose symbolism, especially with like signalling the end of the East India Trading Company, but it's just a beautiful sequence.
Yeah, it's done so well, and you can tell there's some practical effects. You can tell there's obviously CGI to an aspect, but it's the best way for him to go out, and I love it when the Dutchman rises and it's the new captain in the Dutchman.
It's the ultimate tag team match in that one scene. Oh
yeah, it's absolutely brutal. Imagine going out, look to the left, one ship, look to the right, the other ship. It's brutal, and I think it's him that lands on the flag. I've always wondered if that's meant to be him or just a random crew member at the end when he's in the water, but it's a pretty remarkable death. And I'm happy they nailed that because, like I said, I do really like Governor Swann. Not good. What? Wrong one. I love Cutler Beckett, and he goes out the way he should go out. Whereas Davy Jones, freezing up and falling into a maelstrom, maybe could have done better. I like his little sword fight with Jack in the build-up, but I love Will stabbing the heart, him stabbing Will beforehand, as well. But when he dies, he just freezes and flips over the boat. I wish he had something a bit grimmer, as such.
Yeah, and you talked about the sword fight there. I remember seeing that in the trailer and thinking, this is going to be the ultimate sword fight of Pirates of the Caribbean. This is going to top the one with Barbosa from the first movie. And it's awesome. It's an awesome location, but that sword fight is over so quickly because we've got to get to the chest and we've got to fight over who gets the heart. I would have liked a longer sword fight there. But all these things, I think the original cut of this movie, I think the director said was 3 hours. There was 20 minutes extra in this movie, so I don't know if those scenes are on the DVD, if they're the ones in question, or if this is another 20 minutes they had in the final cut and had to get rid of for time. I do think that 3 hours is incredibly pushing it. 2 hours 40 or 2 hours 50, however long this movie is already pushing it, in all honesty. Before I get to my favourite scene, which is pretty much the one you just talked about, and the ending, I really want to bring up that really random Good, the Bad, the Ugly Western scene that just takes place around the 3/4 mark in this movie. The soundtrack just changed. It's the parlay scene, basically, where they're just going to be discussing all the terms, and it kind of gets convoluted as to who's on whose side. But it's just such a sudden tonal change, and I get the reason maybe why, because it's opposing forces bearing down on each other. It's a battle of wits, kind of like a Western, but this is Pirates of the Caribbean, this isn't Cowboys of the Caribbean. Like it just felt really random to me, and every time it gets to that scene, it almost gives me like tonal whiplash. It just takes me out of the movie.
Yeah, it's my issue. The main one is, why is Davy Jones on land? I don't care. There's a bucket. It's stupid. It defeats the purpose of his character. But also, it's like, what are the odds of them finding a bit of land in the middle of the ocean? That's just enough for two boats to pull up to separately. Yes, very, very conspicuous indeed. But it doesn't work. I know they want the build up, and it made sense to have they kind of should meet and match beforehand, but it was too forced. It did not work for the story. They didn't need the parlay for it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And really, you've already talked about it, but the final fight is, well, really, from the maelstrom to the end of the film is my favourite bit. Although that really, really random scene of Will and Elizabeth's last day on the beach was incredibly cringeworthy, and I remember everyone in the cinema just laughing at that because it's the scene where she's like wearing his boot, and it's so cringeworthy. It's just like, oh, Keira Knightley, don't, like, please don't. This is so random. And then he just starts like kissing her leg and shit. It's so random. I hate that scene. But that aside, the maelstrom's fantastic. Visually, the music as well. We need to talk about the soundtrack. This is my favourite Hans Zimmer score probably in all the history of his soundtracks. I know all his soundtracks are very different for the movies they belong to, but in terms of the amount of new themes he brought to this, taking existing themes, ramping them up, making it feel like a conclusion, and that's what this score does to me. It feels like the conclusion of the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, and part of me still wishes it was, in all honesty, although I'm still looking forward to Dead Men Tell No Tales. The soundtrack is phenomenal, whether it's the new romance theme, whether it's the Up Is Down, or the entire battle score. I don't think Now Is the Best Time is the name of the track on the soundtrack. It's all just stunning. Even the Pirates of the Caribbean theme, a theme we've heard twice before this point, in the end credits with Drink Up Me Heart is probably the most powerful and bombastic version of that song out there.
Yeah, the soundtrack's stunning. It's one of the biggest strengths of this film. Credit, it's another amazing score from Hans Zimmer. It perfectly suits the blockbuster genre. It feels like a Pirates of the Caribbean soundtrack. That's the main thing. It would have been too easy, considering this was done between two Batman films. It would have been so easy for him to sort of dip into that, but he completely nailed that Pirates theme, and not necessarily new themes introduced majorly compared to the second film, because obviously 2 is very similar to 3. It's the same story arc, but the soundtrack is very, very well. It's not my favourite. I do prefer Dead Man's Chest, but it's still a stunning score.
Yeah, definitely. And really, just like the very last scene, this is where I always say, and this doesn't excuse the movie one iota, but a good ending can elevate a bad or mediocre movie, because that is the last opinion you're left with when you walk out the cinema. And the ending to this film is nothing shy of perfect. It ties back to the first one. We get Giselle and Scarlett, the 2 prostitutes from Tortuga. We reprise the gag from the first movie. We have Gibbs. His ship's gone again. The pearl's been taken from him. Barbosa's got it again, just like the start of the first movie. But then we find out that Jack Sparrow's got the one up on Barbosa and that he stole the map to the Fountain of Youth. And the final shot of this film is Jack Sparrow in a dinghy, very similar to the one that we see sinking at the beginning of the first film. He's got his bottle of rum, he's got his map to go on a quest on his own, and he sings Drink Up Me Hearties, and we cut to credits just like the first movie. These are endings to trilogies that I like, that do tie back to the first one. It comes full circle, and that's why it's like Indiana Jones' Last Crusade. It's Jack Sparrow in a boat sailing off into the sunset, just like Indiana Jones rode off into the sunset. It's a completely conclusive ending. It did leave it open, but it was more that Jack's gonna do what Jack does best. He's gonna go on more adventures and continue being a pirate, and that's all you needed. And I love the ending to this film. It's my favourite scene in the film. So I guess it's really just down to the ending that I don't hate this movie. If I'm going to give my overall opinions, I still think it's incredibly entertaining. I do think it's a good ending to the Pirate series, although we've addressed for over an hour of all the problems that this movie has and shortcomings, and they could have easily tightened up the story, tightened up the script, removed some of the characters that didn't need to be there. I'll agree with all of the negatives people bring up in this film, but for me personally, I still love it. It's probably my second favourite Pirates of the Caribbean film. I do like it just a little bit over Dead Man's Chest. And I think it's all down to that ending, because I do think the ending was just perfectly crafted. To me, it's an okay ending. It doesn't live up to 1 and 2. It doesn't pay off the build-up that 2 had to the third film. There are, again, some good bits, but to get to that good stuff, you've got to get through a lot of bad things, and it's not worth the weight of the screen time to get to it. It should have finished, and this should have finished as one of the greatest trilogies of all time. Unfortunately, to me, it doesn't because of 3. It's too vague, it's too separate, it's trying to do too much. Simple, concise, this would have been absolutely phenomenal, and the right way to kind of finish the trilogy, knowing they were going to do 4 and now 5. But yeah, there are some good stuff. The ending is great. The final sort of half hour, 40 minutes, absolutely wonderful. But yeah,
again, just everything else, it's not worth it.
So again, we have very similar opinions on this film overall. I think I'm just a little bit more forgiving to this one than maybe you are. So we've been pretty much identical on all of our reviews so far. We'll find out if we are in our next review, which will be Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, which will be coming out tomorrow. I have a lot of thoughts on that movie. That's going to be a very interesting one. And actually, that's the one that I need to rewatch before doing a review, because I've only seen that movie a couple of times, and that might give away what my opinion is on that film. But that'll do it for our review on Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. Be sure to comment, subscribe, let us know what you thought of this movie. Do you like it? Do you think it was a fitting end to the first trilogy? Do you have problems with it? Anything like that, please do get commenting. Let us know how it stacks up among your favourites in the series. There's much more coming on the channel as well. Not only will we have the other Pirates of the Caribbean reviews, there'll be more movie reviews every week, trailer reactions from me. George, you've got your new series, The Rockathon, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've started a series where I'm watching every single film The Rock has ever been in, Rockathon, starting at different points. Episode 1 was The Scorpion King, and on Tuesday, episode 2 is coming out, which is on Doom. I'm going to be kind of looking at the film, looking at him in the film. It's a fanboy's dream, that series. But every 2 weeks on a Tuesday, that's coming out. However, Baywatch is also out next week. So, alongside obviously Pirates of the Caribbean reviews this week, next week we've got Baywatch. Wonder Woman, I think, is out as well over here in the UK. So it's going to be a pretty busy month, and fingers crossed that some of these films are good.
I could do with a good film this month, in all honesty. This movie's been pretty dire through and through. We've got other shows from Tom and Tate as well, so be sure to hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to keep updated with all of the new content we've got coming out. Also, hit the bell icon at the side so you get a notification every time we do post that new content. That'll do it from us, and until the next review, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for listening.